Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. We're here to present on our findings for the alternatives analysis for the Feeder 3 project. It's a project that our consultants at BHI have been working very hard on, and I have Nathan Roberts here and Carl to introduce the topic and to answer all of your questions related to this one. For big picture, we do have a grant application out to WaterSmart for this and have some good potential good news on getting that money, but for now we're in the MRGCD funded portion, which is the planning phase.
Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, Carl and I are pleased to present, as Alicia mentioned, the findings of the preliminary engineering report for Feeder 3. Before we get started, I do want to thank Alicia as well as Angel for all of their efforts and responsiveness and input throughout this process. And as a bonus, all the drone program for MRGCD, they provided a lot of drone shots as part of this presentation. So I hope you guys enjoy that.
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Deisinger, and I do work with Nathan at Bohannan, Huston. So if we could move on to the next slide. Yeah, basically this project, the goal of the project is to reallocate available water within the Riverside Drain upstream of the Garcia extension within Feeder 3. Basically, the Feeder 3 has shown susceptibility to drought conditions as they increase throughout the state, and that leads to unreliable supply in the supporting laterals, Haral lateral number 1, Sabanal lateral number 1, and Garcia extension. So there's a little bit of a lack of redundancy in the system when there's lack of supply or not enough water passing through the flow gate structures. I see the next slide. So yeah, the project goals are, like I said, to reallocate water using the available supply within the Riverside Drain. The district would like to deliver water in increments of 5 CFS up to a maximum of 60 CFS, about 27,000 gallons per minute, into Feeder 3 to support downstream laterals. So we analyzed 5 alternatives. The first one is your base comparison of no action. The following 4 are all different outlays of pump comparisons and transmission line alignments. The 4th alternative I will highlight because it's our recommendation. It includes basically a single set of submersible pumps and 1 diversion point, and the 5th one only differs in that it has 2 transmission lines with dedicated pump sets. So this is just a visual of the project area between the Belen High Line and the Rio Grande. We are talking about pumping water from the Riverside Drain to that point just west of the Garcia extension. So this project came with a couple design considerations. Obviously, we at Bohannan Huston like to talk about the technical stuff, the transmission line capacity, flow rates, velocity, etc. We're also very aware of the district's design considerations, such as land acquisition, cost, construction, constructability, maintenance, and the environmental impact. So those were all considerations we made when we tried to provide a recommendation. And this is basically a description. We analyzed several pipe sizes, anywhere in the range of 20-inch pipe diameter to 42-inch pipe diameter. We felt that 36 was the most appropriate due to the basically balance between your boundary conditions at your minimum flow and maximum flow. We are trying to keep the maximum flow velocity below that 10 feet per second to reduce your pipe wear over time. And as you can see in this chart, there's at your maximum flow, you're well under that range, and we believe that the minimum flow is still enough velocity to push any silt or debris through the system. We'd obviously like it more if we could operate around the average. And I'll hand it over to Nathan to talk about pumps.
So with the transmission line diameter and the pumps, we did take a look at a couple different pump alternatives. 2 of the ones that were shown here, we do not recommend. The one that is the isometric shows a vacuum priming pump, and that's really to pull the water out of the ditch up to the pump and motor assembly. Talking with a couple pump suppliers, This is an alternative that could work, but we'd want to vet a little further, and part of that is just making sure we don't clog the system as we're actually actively sucking from the canal. The other one is a skid pump system, so it would actually be up on the ditch. This is similar to the Corrales siphon at the moment. However, with the Corrales siphon, that is actually a smaller amount of flow that's going through there and a smaller amount of lift. And the options here for selecting pumps with 60 CFS and between 20 feet and 80 feet of lift is not a feasible option. So with the next slide, our recommendation is, again, looking at some sort of submersible pump and motor assembly. This is similar to what was built in constructed at the Socorro main canal outside of San Antonio, New Mexico, but with the nuance of we're looking at different suppliers to make sure that MRGCD can feel comfortable and have the ability to operate and maintain these pumps themselves. Next slide. So looking at the cost comparison of the 5 alternatives, no action is obviously the cheapest, but we would expect your O&M to continue to increase, and then it doesn't solve the issue of your reliability or redundancy when it comes to supplying feeder 3 and then conveying flows to the south. 2 and 3 are very similar because the main difference is the pumps that are selected. So whether it is trying to use a pump in the ditch or a pump on top of the ditch, costs are about the same. The other thing that we looked at with those alternatives was actually pumping to 2 different outfall locations. One just above the Sabinal and Haral Langham Gate, and the other then pumping all the way up to the Garcia extension. And so by having 2 penetrations into feeder 3, it required a little bit more control and a little bit more consideration and a little bit more operational attention. With the single outfall, we're able to pump from the Riverside drain all the way to the Garcia extension and then use the existing assets that the district has to then divert flows to the Garcia lateral as well as the Haral and Sabinal laterals. And then the dual transmission lines are the most expensive option because if you have more transmission lines, you're going to have more costs. Next slide. And this evaluation matrix just looks at those other considerations that Carl mentioned: operational flexibility, land acquisition, costs, construction, maintenance, and environmental considerations. So not only was alternative 4 the best alternative from a cost standpoint, it also rated the best when we did the evaluation matrix. Next slide. And so this is very similar to the other slide. And I would just say all the options that we described, we're looking at, rather than using gravity from Berlin Highline to convey flows from west to east, all of these alternatives are looking at taking flows from the Riverside drain and actually pumping them from east to west. And this is probably the grainiest slide in the presentation, but it's not taken by a drone, it's taken by us. But this is looking to the west towards I-25. And when we're talking about increasing the lift of the pump station, you can see with these check structures, really the farther to the west you go, the higher those lift conditions become. But really just hitting it home, lower capital costs, least amount of disturbance, easiest to operate and maintain, and which is why we're recommending alternative 4 to the board.
Madam Chair, members of the board, before we take questions, one of the things that you'll notice from the presentation is there is a specific process that they followed for their alternative analysis that meets the requirement for federal funding. So if you want to know why that looks like a federal process, the intention was, as we were always going to be applying for federal grants. We think we have hit on that, and we think that we'll get notice that we will be receiving that money. So the goal of this analysis was to be able to then turn in with that and have it qualify immediately, and then we keep moving forward to the next stage. One of the things on Feeder 3 that's important too is the Riverside drain happens to be where we want to take the water from, and Feeder 3 goes over the top of it. And so the what's nice about the alternative that's being chosen is it's one system that lifts water right from the drain, all the way back up close to I-25, puts the water back into feeder 3, and then it flows back down feeder 3 and uses all the existing diversion works. And then anything that doesn't get used can outlet back to the river and be used for, say, one of Mr. Ish's environmental string of pearls projects. And so with that, I just wanted to make sure you understood there's a certain process we're following this because we knew we were going to get federal money. And so I appreciate Bohannan and Huston. They did a great job in even the matrices of evaluation, all of the characteristics that the federal government would want to see be evaluated, along with a consideration for the number of alternatives that need to be evaluated from a NEPA standpoint. So with that, we'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Does anybody